Hello and welcome to Let's Review. Quite some time ago, I reviewed the Banner Saga, one of the few genuine success stories to come out of Kickstarter, and I found it to be okay. While I really like the combat system, the story failed to grab me simply because I failed to connect with any of its characters, and that left it being a little bit disappointing. I wasn't as enraptured with it as many people seem to be. Recently, however, the sequel, the Banner Saga 2, came out, and it seemed logical to cover it and hopefully see if they fixed the deficiencies I had with the previous game. So, have they fixed them? Well, to answer that, we will start as we always do, with the gameplay. The gameplay of the Banner Saga 2 is mostly identical to its predecessor, although there have certainly been a few tweaks, particularly in the levelling system.
This is the screen from which we manage our heroes, and in particular this is where we level them up. Now from this very early point in the game, we have quite a lot of heroes available to us, and at different times, depending on your decisions, different people will be available. Sometimes people will get killed and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take Alette as our example since she's one of the main characters. Now down here we have her kill numbers and the numbers of enemies that you need in order to get promoted. So she's killed 12 enemies, and in order to reach level 6, she needs to have killed 11. So obviously I can promote her, and that's when this banner appears. So I'm going to promote her now. And in the previous game, the maximum rank you could achieve was level 5, which Alette was in that game, since I loaded a save game over. So I'm going to do that, and she can choose the Overwatch ability. Some characters will have the ability to choose multiple options. Alette here only appears to have the one, which is Overwatch, which knocks an arrow and waits. So choose that. And that's going to cost me 13 renown to promote it, so my renown total is up there. Renown is gained by winning battles, and various other events throughout the game can also give you some renown. Now, the point system is basically the same as before, with you adding to total of either shield strength, regular strength, and regular strength also defines your damage as well as your health. Willpower, the amount of willpower they can use in a single action, and the amount of damage they can do to enemy armor and shields. But it's also got a new thing, which is if you've reached the maximum rank of it, you can choose one of two variants at the top end. So for example, we can gain bonus hit chance, or we can gain the ability to dodge for that. Or if we were to go into here, we could gain either Robust or Artery Strike, which would make us either tougher or potentially give us a much better chance to crit. Since I want that, and I want her doing as much damage as possible, I'm going to spend the 2 points into Strength. And once she gets 3 more kills, she'll be able to level up again. There's also items you can get, which are all arrayed along the bottom like so, and if I pick one at random, this brooch gives 1 strength resistance, which is potentially useful. So that's higher damage resist. This one is equipped on our Mender character, and is the Puzzle Box of the Twin Rivers, which gives him +3 will and +1 will per turn, which is very useful for a Mender who's going to be using an awful lot of willpower on each turn. And that's basically it for the management of your characters. It's fairly similar to how it was before, just with the extra addition of these boosts here.
The differences here are relatively minor, but I do like the idea behind them. Unfortunately, I think the execution needed a little bit of work. A few of the enhanced skills are either completely useless or are poorly explained, so you'll end up just having 1 or 2 that you'll give to everybody, regardless of their role in combat, which is a little disappointing. The journey system has not actually changed in the slightest from the previous game, but I'll show it again anyway, just in case anybody hasn't seen my review of the first game.
This is the journey screen, and it's broadly the same as it was before. You travel from left to right, and as you do so, events will crop up like this, and this day timer will slowly move around. As you can see from the 1 at the top, this is very, very early in the game. For the simple reason that because this game doesn't let you save throughout, I can't use a mid-campaign save like I normally would, so I've just started a new game and I'm demonstrating from there. So you'll get events like this that crop up occasionally, so we have to decide how we're going to respond. So yeah, we have our options here, but I'm going to go with my father was great, I hope to be remembered as fondly. And this has gained us some additional morale, and it's reasonably useful. Up here we have our renown, which is basically how well known we are, and that's used to level up our heroes, as you saw before. We have our morale in the middle, and we have our supplies. Now that's actually not number of supplies, that's number of days that our current supplies will last. So every time this day timer ticks over, you'll lose 1 day off your remaining supply days. However, it's also worth noting that certain events can reduce or increase your supplies, so that will be ongoing. Again, we have this option here, so, for example, we can tell them that the walls have never been breached. And that will sort of, and that's boosted his morale. And in all honesty, that's really all there is to that particular bit. It poodles along, and then, you also have this map here, but I literally never bother looking at the map in the actual main game. It's fairly pointless. However, the tutorial insists you look at it. But, no, that really is all there is to that segment, to the journey. It's just moving from left to right, and things will happen on the way.
As before, this system is perfectly fine, and it certainly looks very pretty, although it does get a little tedious further into the game. And it's also worth noting it continues its rather irritating pattern of screwing you over every time you try to help someone. This naturally leads into the main combat segment, which was definitely the highlight of the previous game.
This is the main tactical battle screen of the Banner Saga 2. Over here we have some enemies, in this case Dredge, and over here we have our units. This is before the actual battle begins, and from here we can place our units anywhere within these blue areas. Now, for this battle, several of our units are not available because they're over here busy doing something for a quest event. Specifically, they're meant to be clearing the way for us, while we hold against these Dredge. It's also worth noting that this game adds in something that wasn't in the previous game, which is terrain blockages. So this large stump here, for example, the enemy can't get round that. Now, that sort of thing was in the previous game, however, you will also get destructible terrain coverage in this. So that could include, for example, wooden stakes in the ground to slow the enemy down, and various other bits and bobs. Those will all be very specially related to a specific event or mission. So I'm going to move my unit forward now, because there's no point having them all the way at the back where they can't do anything. And I also want to make sure that my melee unit, ranged units are covered by my melee units. Specifically, I'm going to send him to there. Move her over there. Move her. And send him all the way around. So if the enemy wants to come at us, they're going to have to come either here or here, and either way it's covered by one of our men. It's worth noting that because this is one of the earliest battles in the game is going to keep trying to offer tutorial hints. I apologize for that. So, I can move her initially if I want to. And I think I'm going to. I'm going to move her to there, which puts her right on the corner of this stump, so she's well covered. And I'm going to use a new ability she gains in this one called Overwatch, which you saw me get earlier from promoting her to rank 6. This means that any time an enemy comes into her engagement range, she will put an arrow in them. He is just outside of it. Now, Ekkel here is a armoured guy. He's basically designed to sit there, take a lot of damage. So I'm going to move him up, and I'm going to have him attack this enemy for 6 damage. And I had to use some willpower to do that. Occasionally during events, the little scripted dialogue things will come up like that. Oh, I forgot to move oddly earlier. That occasionally happens if you don't notice a character is there because they're kind of half hidden. Now, once again, I'm going to move my archer into a slightly better position. And she now has a shot at this guy, and she might as well take him down. And that's a kill. Willpower is limited, but you can restore it to an individual unit by using the Warhorn. And the Warhorn's charges are built up by killing enemies, as you just saw. Now this is Evian. He's my mender, and he has a number of skills. Later in the game, he'll pick up an ability called Troll Stones, which allows you to summon a short-term cover, which is quite useful for creating choke points and forcing the enemy through. He's also got a mend ability which restores armor to units, but obviously I don't need that at the moment since my units have not taken any damage as of yet. He can also throw out arc lightning, which is more effective when the enemy clumps together because it'll jump from enemy to enemy, providing they're on a diagonal to each other. But obviously there weren't any other enemies in convenient distance there. And I'm going to move my shield bearer over here and have him end his turn because there's nobody he can attack in range. Now, she didn't actually need to shoot anybody with her Overwatch on that turn, but she could have done. And Overwatch is sufficiently useful that I'm just going to keep using it on her. Because I suspect this enemy might be about... Nope. Okay, he attacked his own guy in order to push him that way. You'll occasionally see them use tactics like that. I personally don't favour them. And instead I'm going to activate Stonewall, which makes him a lot tougher. Occasionally the enemy will do things like that, and sometimes I have a hard time figuring out what the hell they think they're doing. Now, I'm also going to make use of her Rain of Arrows ability. This is an area denial ability. So if an enemy steps onto that tile, they will get hit with an arrow. Ah, that was Alette's. There we go. That's why I put Stonewall on him, because it makes him more resistant to damage. And again, I can take that guy out with a finishing shot from Nid. And that seems to be Nid's job at the moment, finishing off already wounded enemies. As you can see, this battle's going very well because I have a pretty strong party here, especially given that this is a very early game level. I'm going to put him there specifically to draw the enemy towards that point where I've... There we go. I'm going to move her to there, and once again I'm going to put her on Overwatch. So if any of these guys try to move, they're going to get shot at, like that. This guy's also going to fall directly onto that, which was sufficient to kill him. And this unit is out of willpower, because he doesn't have terribly much willpower. But as I say, I can restore it with the horn. And the blue tiles are where he can move normally. The yellow is where he can move if he uses willpower. So I'm going to... Actually, I'm going to leave him exactly where he is, because if this guy comes around, he's a 2-tile thick unit, so he can't maneuver past down there to get him a more vulnerable units. So I'm going to leave him there in a defensive position. Meanwhile, I'm going to repeat the process with Oddleaf and put a rain of arrows there. So anybody trying to attack this unit here is going to get stopped. It might not necessarily kill them, but it has the advantage of actually preventing them from moving. I have no idea what he was meant to be attacking there. I suspect that might have been a minor AI bug. I'm going to move her to there so she's in effective range of him. And because he's still got quite a lot of armor, I'm going to take away as much of it as I can, which should allow me a much easier time of killing him. You'll notice she did higher damage to him because he was already injured. And once again, I could use him aggressively in order to... Yes, I'm going to throw some arc lightning at him. If he was if he was one tile that way, if that were possible, then the arc lightning would actually jump into our ally, and it would get stronger and stronger the more allies or enemies it goes through. So you do have to be careful with arc lightning because it can harm your own units. But if you use it effectively inside a grouped enemy formation, it can do a lot of damage. And that guy's taking serious damage. Enough that you can't quite kill him, but you can reduce him to 1 health, which means he's going to die the second anybody points anything at him. And just because she could do with some kills, I'll give her the kill. So once again, thanks to his Stonewall ability, he was able to resist that with absolute ease, and he can get the kill. And that guy's gone, which means there's only 1 enemy left. Once there's only 1 enemy left, they go into Pillage mode. And what Pillage mode does is rather than alternating between our turn and the enemy's, then all units move according to speed. The enemy gets 1 turn, and then we get everything based on what we've got moving. So Oddleaf is going to fire some arrows into him. It's worth noting that because his armor rating is higher than her strength rating, she has a chance to not actually get the hit in. It might reflect off his armor. In this case, it's a 40% chance to actually get the hit in, which is obviously not terribly good. So I'm going to use this armor breaking shot to reduce his armor. I'm going to move Nid over to here where she can get into range. And I'm going to use 3 willpower from the horn to also reduce his armor. Avian's just going to rest because there's nothing worthwhile for him to do. And you are going to bring the pain and badly weaken him. And she's going to finish the job. And that was a very, very straightforward fight. Some battles will actually allow you to do this, which is actually continue the fight in order to, achieve a greater level of victory and just, generally earn more reward. But obviously that's potentially risky, or it would be if it wasn't for the fact that we just won that battle in the most one-sided way possible. I don't think we took any damage at all there. And overall, that is a very general overview of the battle system of the Banner Saga 2.
The combat here continues to be the best part of the game. However, there is one flaw that I sort of noticed in the previous game that becomes very apparent here. Archers are significantly more powerful than melee fighters, and this becomes especially apparent when the game requires you to take charge of a force which only has melee fighters. And as a result, half the battles become incredibly difficult, while the other half are pathetically easy. This is kind of a balancing problem, and I suspect it can be worked out with patches rather than requiring anything major, but it is kind of an issue that really nukes my enjoyment of the game, especially when I have to go over to those segments where I'm just getting through tedious battle after tedious battle. Overall, though, I will freely admit that the gameplay is definitely the best aspect of this game. The combat in particular does genuinely require some thought, assuming you're not like me and you don't just load your entire squad up with nothing but archers. The story of the Banner Saga 2 follows on directly from the end of the first one. You can actually load in your save game to make your choices carry over. And as such, there will be some minor spoilers for the first game in this review. Just be aware of that. The story begins following the battle that concluded the previous game and the death of one of the protagonists. The caravan once again sets off, this time heading for the human capital. Meanwhile, the mysterious menders who you have with you continue to be mysterious. In an interesting way, or an annoying one? Starts off the former, but is definitely the latter by the end. It also doesn't help that this game does not actually have an ending, it just stops. It has one of the most infuriating sequel hooks I've seen in quite a long time, and frankly I absolutely agree with the people on the forums who are currently complaining about it. Did they at least fix the issues that you had previously? Kinda. No, not really. My big problem with the previous game was that I found it very difficult to empathise with any of the characters because 99% of their dialogue was exposition. Here it's slightly better, it's probably only about 85% exposition. There are actually 1 or 2 scenes that are genuinely just 2 characters interacting and talking to each other, and those are probably some of the best moments in this game. The rest of the time, however, it's still focused on how grim and dark the situation is and how totally screwed everything is, and oh god, frankly, I just got burned out by the end of it. Is that not perhaps intentional? You think they wanted to make the players as emotionally numb as the characters become? Interesting idea. Seriously doubt it was what they were going for. Once again, there are still too many protagonists in this game. In particular, a new character, or he was a very minor player towards the end of the previous game, rises to serious prominence here, and he actually ends up splitting off from the group with his own caravan. And because the game keeps cutting back to him so that you have to take over as players him for a bit, that really annoyed me because, well, frankly, I wanted to punch him in the face. Well, at least you had some feelings about him. Granted, but when the character that I can remember the most, I only remember because I want to throttle him, that's not a good sign for the rest of the cast. Honestly, outside of the caravan leaders, I can't remember a single character's name unless they were exceptionally useful in combat. I can remember Oddly for the simple reason that I used her in pretty much every combat engagement, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about her personality. Are all of the characters really so poorly defined. Yup, and there are still a metric bucket load of them, which does not help proceedings in the slightest. The problem here is not that I hate the story. The problem isn't even that I dislike the story. The problem is that the story doesn't make me feel anything at all. I want to empathise with these people, but I can't. I'm just sitting there and I'm completely numb to the entire proceeding. And ultimately, I think that's a bigger failing than me hating it. The graphics of this game are pretty good for the most part, although I should mention I did notice one particularly odd graphical glitch whereby characters would flicker and vanish. This is particularly infuriating because it often led to me getting attacked by invisible enemies, and I'm pretty sure they weren't supposed to be invisible, and it also meant I couldn't tell where people were and thus my tactical planning went to hell. This is extremely frustrating and I really hope they get it fixed. As for the rest of the graphics, they're basically fine. I could do with a few more options to tweak them, but given that this isn't exactly a massively taxing game, I can't really mark them down too firmly for that. Overall, if they can get the bugs nailed out, the technical department will be fine. The art for this game continues to be excellent, and it's one of the few things I can be unambiguously enthused about. The backgrounds are gorgeous, especially when you're manoeuvring around the world, and a lot of the character designs are really quite good. There's also little short animation sequences that are also really beautiful to look at, and I compliment the art team on them. Overall, just a fantastic job by the art team in general. The music is still really gorgeous, although for whatever reason I seem to notice it a lot less this time around. I'm not sure if they've toned it down a little or if that's just the way I interpreted it. The voice acting is very limited once again, usually just very small segments as you enter a certain town, and again it's all very exposition based, so it's functional, but that's about it. As for the sound effects, most of them are pretty damn good. I particularly like the wet funk sound whenever a sword strike comes in, and just a lot of the special moves also have some pretty good sound effects. So overall, the audio is pretty good. So, did I enjoy the Banner Saga 2? Kinda. Should you buy it? I think I'm going to put this one firmly on my consider getting it when it's cheap list. While, if you enjoyed the previous game, you will definitely enjoy this one, the reason for that is simply that it's more of the same. This honestly doesn't feel like a sequel. This feels like an expansion that's just continuing on the story without changing the gameplay in any significant way at all. If you're alright with that, great, but personally, I would have loved to see them change it up, do a few interesting and slightly different things, and take a few more risks, which this game doesn't do. Ultimately, this is basically just the Banner Saga 1 all over again, with the exact same problems that I had with the previous one. Not bad by any means, but I feel there's a lot more they could have done with the concept. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a guest coming round and I probably ought to put the kettle on. I'll see you later. So, what do you want to know?
So, where did Annie come from anyway? I mean, how do you make a magic sword?
With something far, far older. We considered not showing you this, but, well, we agreed to tell you everything.
What is it?
That is Talon. At least that's what I call it. I have no idea what it was originally named, or even if it had a name. I also have no idea where it came from, but I do know it is very, very old.
These are Egyptian hieroglyphs, aren't they?
They are, but when I took them to get translated, turns out they're meaningless. complete and utter gibberish. It's either some incomprehensible code, or more likely they were added sometime after it was forged by somebody who thought they looked good.
So when you say this dagger makes magic swords...
He means it. That knife is what is used to turn steel into soul steel.
How?
By binding a human soul to it. For all of eternity.
You mean you have to kill someone with it?
The ultimate act of sacrifice. A human being giving up their life, their body, all that they are and ever will be, to become a weapon against evil.
But then that means... You mean Annie?
That someone died to make her. I only wish I knew her name. Whoever she was far braver than I am. You can't use an unwilling subject to create a soul steel weapon. It doesn't work. It has to be a willing act of sacrifice, the willingness to die so that others can live. The only time I know of that it was even attempted, the weapon destroyed those who created it.
I mean...
Take some time. Finish your tea. These are not easy concepts to come to terms with. And you're not under any time constraint. Think about something else for a time. How goes your PhD, for example?
Oh, well, really good at the minute. I mean, I've just been writing a bit about the effect Christianity had on the early Renaissance. It's quite fascinating, really. I mean, take the music, for example.